Would you recommend more of lower the carbs a certain percentage on a weekly basis to gain that metabolic flexibility? Or how do you feel about somebody going cold turkey if they're on a standard type diet and just really cutting the carbs down right away?
I think it depends on who you are. I've seen it work both ways. Actually, when I started a ketogenic diet, it was funny. Um, I tried going low carb first for a couple days. I'm like, I'm going to get my carbs below 100. I tried it for 3 days and I could not do it. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to go below 10. And it was so much easier. For me, it was so much easier because I'm an all and nothing kind of person. You know what I mean? Some people are like that. Other people kind of need to titrate in. So it really is just how you work. There could be something to easing into it for obvious reasons. There could be something to going cold turkey because then you kind of, we talked about that cycle earlier. You might remove the stimulus for that cycle. So you don't kind of, throw the match at the kindling, so to speak, with respect to your sugar appetite. Are you someone, if they have a little bit of sweet, if you're saying, I'm going to like titrate down, but they know if they have that Pringle I guess that's not sweet, but if they have like cookie, you're not going to just eat the one Oreo cookie. So are you a person that can actually eat one Oreo cookie? Or is it going to be easier for you to say, I'm committing to cutting out this group entirely, acknowledging that there might be an adaptation period that's not comfortable, but the grass could be greener on the other side. So again, bracing for that, being like, look, if I'm going to try this, I'm going to give it a full 6-week trial. I realize it might be a little bit uncomfortable during adaptation, but I'm going to kind of, quote, trust the process and hope it gets better. Actually, there's really interesting mouse data on fasting and amygdala activity. The amygdala is the fight or flight region of the brain. And they've done these experiments in mice where they measure amygdala activity. Specifically, I'm saying mice because while you can do some degree of measurements via like fMRI, they're actually looking for early gene expression, which requires decapitation and brain staining. So you're not going to do that in humans, that aside. When they introduce, say, food restriction to mice for 24 hours, there's this massive jump in amygdala activity, like a threefold jump. But if they then habituate them to fasting, and then expose them to the same food restriction, so no food, say, for 24 hours, that, which was a threefold jump in amygdala activity, drops to zero. The reason I bring this up is because your brain will rewire and adapt, and your metabolism will rewire and adapt not to have that unpleasant stress response. And you can shift from being someone who's like, I can't imagine fasting. That sounds so terrible. I can't imagine going 18 hours without food or 20 hours or, God forbid, 24 hours without food, to being someone who actually enjoys it. I definitely used to be someone like, I'm going to eat 6-7 times a day. And now if you told me, like, Nick, you had to eat 3 meals a day every day, I'd be like, ugh, that sounds so unpleasant. There's something very liberating once you can listen to your body's actual nutritional hunger. Then you just eat when you're hungry. You don't eat when you're not hungry. It becomes very liberating because then you're not tied down to eating all the time. And when you do eat, you can basically indulge and trust that your body is going to handle things. That's kind of more advanced. I'd say that's when you can really trust your body to, quote, eat intuitively, which is kind of a funny term because we hear it all the time. And I think it's abused because it's like eat intuitively. For most people who are metabolically unhealthy, their, quote, intuition is going to tell them to eat junk. You can only truly eat intuitively when you're metabolically healthy and your true hunger for nutrition, like nutrition for your body, isn't being obscured by a hormonal roller coaster driving pseudo hunger. So I am for intuitive eating, but real intuitive eating, not virtue signaling YOLO intuitive eating.
Another layer on all this, as you talk about that, is the fact that we've been told to eat 6 times a day, and that's actually good for our metabolism. So people that are actually trying to work with their metabolism and make conscious choices can go astray following conventional advice.
It's unbelievable to me. Well, actually, it's believable, but unbelievable in the vernacular. The degree to which these myths get perpetuated and the degree to which authorities or self-proclaimed authorities speak about them with confidence without ever digging in to the basis for what are effectively myths. And I'm thinking about like one recent episode in particular where I was sitting in, let's say, a graduate level course on nutrition. Was not my favorite course. You probably can tell by my eyes rolling. But where an instructor literally said that breakfast is the match that starts your metabolism, and you're going to have metabolic damage, metabolic slowing if you don't eat breakfast. And in the room, I was probably one of the more informed students in that role on metabolism. But even those who had no background in metabolism kind of looked around and rolled their eyes a little bit. And nevertheless, an instructor was comfortable saying that as if it were metabolic fact, when it's nonsense. It's made up. What do you mean breakfast is the match that starts your metabolism? So if I don't eat breakfast, if I don't eat for 24 hours or whatever, my mitochondria are just going to go, I give up. I give up. No more energy. Like, it's ridiculous. But it enters the common knowledge base and then just gets perpetuated as its own meme without any interrogation of the underlying data. So we have a lot of these myths that they do just like have their own life, and it is the definition of a meme. So anyway, I guess I don't like the term "do your own research" because I feel like it gives license for actually disregarding real data. But in this respect, at least question when you hear a bit of common knowledge. What's the evidence base for this? Is it something that is legit, or are people just blowing smoke because this is now entered into the zeitgeist?
Well, the 6 meals a day is one extreme.
Yeah.
But for somebody that is cutting back to, say, 1 meal a day, or they're having multiple meals a day, say even 2 or 3 meals, but they're really bringing calories down, is there any merit to that quote unquote breaking of the metabolism if we're really bringing calories down, or we get hardcore into fasting and go to 1 meal a day or beyond?
I think with caloric restriction, yes. Not with fasting that isn't, forcibly calorically restricted. With the whole 1 meal a day thing or longer fast, I'd say that's very individual. One, do you enjoy it? I don't think that there are big benefits to being a 1 meal a day person, say, versus being someone who eats in like a 8 hour window with 2 meals a day or even three. So if it's pleasant for you and you can tolerate it, fine. But I don't think you're going to get this huge metabolic advantage from being a 1 meal a day person. Also, at least for me, and just speaking from my own experience, 1 meal a day is really hard because it just causes stomach aches. Like the amount you have to eat if you're eating 1 meal a day, and the fact that if you fast, right, your body it's good for your GI tract to have a little bit of time when the highway of the GI tract isn't being, let's say there's not a lot of traffic on it. It gives time for repair. You can think about it like that. But systems in the gut do get down regulated, and they take a little bit of time to get back online. So if you're only eating once every 24 hours and you're throwing a huge bolus onto a GI system that isn't ready, it's a formula for GI upset. So I find 1 meal a day quite unpleasant. Some people really love it. If you do, then great. If you tolerate it, then great. I just put out there is an art to breaking a fast. This isn't necessarily the thing we're going to dig into today, but just be mindful of that it might end up being really unpleasant if you're just like eating one huge meal. Also, if you're someone who would tend to like then make poor dietary choices during that one meal, I see that happen as well. So I don't practice it. I think it's fine if people do. I don't think it's necessarily going to cause metabolic damage. Forced caloric restriction can cause metabolic damage, particularly yo-yo dieting, for several reasons. One thing it can do is place an obesogenic fingerprint on your microbiome. So if you restrict energy, there can be changes in a lot of things in your body, but including in your microbiome. And your microbiome kind of learns to become more frugal with the energy it's provided and better at extracting energy. And the thing is, once you refeed this obesogenic fingerprint, now I'm drawing mostly from preclinical trials at this point in time, but it does definitely line up with the human data. Think about the biggest losers trials. The obesogenic fingerprint remains. And so you kind of get like this staircase function, right? It's one way to think about it. Maybe it's the fear-mongering way to think about it, but nevertheless, where you restrict, your body then has a change to be better at extracting calories from your microbiome. You probably have more fuel partitioning in fat rather than lean tissue. And then you eventually break, you refeed, and even though you've gained the weight back, it doesn't reverse the obesogenic fingerprint. And now you're set up for, being a little bit more behind the eight ball going forward. I will say I don't think it's just a upward stepwise function. Like if you've yo-yo dieted in the past, it doesn't mean you're doomed these things are dynamic enough that they can readjust. And I've seen people's basal metabolic rates, or let's say a daily energy expenditure, skyrocket with refeeding. There's mixed data on, the size of the effect, but some RCTs like the Framingham feeding trial, I think it was somewhere on the order of 200 plus calories with a carbohydrate restricted diet at 20% kcal from carbs versus 60% kcal from carbs. I'm pretty sure that was it. And in RCT, that was kind of like weight locked. So they were looking at energy expenditure by virtue of like what you need to maintain a certain weight, swapping out calories anyway. So there was an advantage, but what I'll say is that has a lot of heterogeneity. So I've seen some people's metabolic rates, if they've been calorically restricted, upon refeeding jump tremendously, such that you get these paradoxical results where someone might be restricting to 1,200 calories and have still a little bit of a muffin top. And they feed up to 2,000, 2,200 calories, even with an immediate change without titration. And they end up losing weight over 3 weeks and losing body fat. That does happen. And as much as you might think, oh, the person must be lying, calories in, calories out is, the law of all diets. It's the be all end all. Pause and think that calorie balance is more a consequence than a cause of obesity. So it's more about your body, we went over this earlier, telling the energy where to go through the hormonal system. Are you storing it in fat? Are you expending it? Are you putting it into lean tissue? And so if you have a change that also favorably changes fuel partitioning, you could have massive increases in things like energy expenditure, and you could be partitioning less energy into fat tissue. So it's perfectly feasible that somebody could go from a 1,200 calorie diet to a 2,000 calorie diet and, over a short time frame from that change, actually end up losing weight, and over the long time frame as well. So long answer short, you can induce metabolic damage with caloric restriction. It can be recovered, although the cycle of yo-yo dieting, where you just focus on restricting calories and you break and you go back to restricting calories, generally will put you behind the 8 ball and make it harder and harder to lose weight until you get that metabolic reset.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Towards the end of college, I started developing GI upset with basically anything I ate. So I ended up becoming quite desperate, and after trying a bunch of medications that didn't end up really working to keep me in remission or help my symptoms, I tried a bunch of different diets because I was desperate.